Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's discussion will be on Thomas Paine and Independence Day, and next week the topic will be creating a nucleus of universal brotherhood. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. Our lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave at the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Among thousands of mortals, a single one perhaps strives for perfection. And among those so striving, perhaps a single one knows me as I am. Earth, water, fire, air, and Akasha, Manas, Buddhi, and Ahankara is the eightfold division of my nature. It is inferior. Know that my superior nature is different and is the knower. By it, the universe is sustained. Learn that the whole of creation springs from this too, as from a womb. I am the cause, I am the production, and the dissolution of the whole universe. There is none superior to me, O conqueror of wealth, and all things hang on me as precious gems upon a string. I am the taste and water, O son of Kunti, the light in the sun and moon, the mystic syllable Om in all the Vedas, sound in space, the masculine essence in men, the sweet smell in the earth, and the brightness in the fire. In all creatures I am the life, and the power of concentration in those whose minds are on the spirit. Know me, O son of Pritha, as the eternal seat of all creatures. I am the wisdom of the wise, and the strength of the strong. And I am the power of the strong, who in action are free from desire and longing. In all creatures I am desire, regulated by moral fitness. Know also that the dispositions arising from the three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are from me. They are in me, but I am not in them. The whole world, being deluded by these dispositions, which are born of the three qualities, knoweth not me distinct from them, supreme, imperishable. For this my divine elusive power, acting through the natural qualities, is difficult to surmount, and those only can surmount it who have recourse to me alone. And now for today's talk.
Good morning and welcome, friends. Today is really a special topic because we're talking about Thomas Paine, who was the one person that was instrumental in bringing about secession of the colonies from Great Britain, British Isles at that time, and establishing a new order of things to come in America. So who was Thomas Paine, and why should we talk about him? Mr. Judge has an article, as well as HPB, where it says that it is our responsibility to give those who have done a whole lot of work on behalf of humanity honor that they deserve. And unfortunately for us, Thomas Paine had written some literature towards the end of his life that was not appreciated by the dogma followers of that day, and so his name has been really tarnished, and we need to put it back to where it needs to go. He was born in 1737 to a very humble staymaker. A staymaker is someone who makes ropes in Thetford, England, and it is stated that a great soul had come into incarnation and would help the American nation into being by drafting a Bill of Rights, also for the French Republic, as we will see. He suffered ignominy and imprisonment. He was denounced for more than a century, but finally came forth as an emancipator of the human race. So that was his destiny. From his earlier childhood, he kind of rebelled against inhumanity of men to men, and he experienced this on his way to school, where he saw gallows where people were hung, and also pillory, where people were punished in front of the whole community for the errors they made. His first written document is to the British Parliament on behalf of the overworked and underpaid excisemen, whose lot he also shared. And he makes a statement that there were two classes of thoughts. One, that he produced in himself by reflection and through thinking, and the other lot, he said, bolted into his mind of their own accord. He called these voluntary visitors and admitted that he was indebted to them for all the knowledge he had, because according to history, his education finished when he was about 13 years old, which the student does not believe, because he was a great thinker and also inventor, as we will see a little bit later on. So these voluntary visitors we need to take note of. So we sometimes go to bed thinking on a problem, and in the morning we know the answer, and perhaps we have voluntary visitors at night as well, because it is true that we do. There's an article also, I think it's Mr. Judge's, it's titled Adepts and Politics, and Mr. Judge assumes responsibility for writing this article. And he says in it that the adepts at that time, having found the time opportune, came to the hemisphere of the Americas and helped actually in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution that was drafted by Thomas Paine at that time. So then he says that the masters looked around to see whom they could influence to come to the United States and help the British colonies at that time, who were still under the reign of Great Britain. And they found, he says, Thomas Paine, and they influenced him through that thinking process by interjecting into his mind all the things that he needed to know. So he definitely was influenced, and Thomas Paine says, in his mind, he said, he saw a vista opening to the whole humanity through the means of America. I saw, this is a quote, I saw, or at least I thought I saw, a vast scene opening itself to the world in the affairs of America, and it appeared to me that unless the Americans changed the plan they were pursuing with respect to the government of England and declared themselves independent, they would shut out the prospect that was then offering itself to mankind through their means. So this vision is what actually enabled Thomas Paine to leave England and to come to the United States. He was 37 years old when he arrived on our shores, and he immediately went to Philadelphia. Now, this student has had to listen to very negative comments about Thomas Paine up to maybe 3 years ago by the God of men, I should say, and leave it at that, because they had nothing good to say about Thomas Paine, and all this stuff was camouflaged. So we really have to ask ourselves, who was he, and how did he achieve this tremendous work? Because you will see that when you look into his life events, he kind of stood all by himself to the pressures of the time. He wanted the truth, and he wanted the American colonies to become independent. And so he stood that loneliness all by himself to the powers at that time. When he came, he went to Philadelphia, we said, and he had recommendation letters from Benjamin Franklin, who was at that time in London and had met Paine. The letters introduced him to Buck, who was the son-in-law of Franklin, and he introduced Franklin to Thomas Paine to Etkin. Through that introduction, he became the editor of that magazine, who was then the center of what was going on, because Philadelphia was the center at that time. His first article that was written was A Serious Thought, which was printed in the Pennsylvania Journal in 1775, in which Paine condemned the horrid cruelties exercised by Britain and prophesied secession of the colonies. Then he wrote his article, which was the forerunner of Common Sense, and that was anonymously produced in 1776. And it is stated that 500,000 copies were soon distributed, and he accepted no money for this work. We have a statement from Thomas Jefferson, and this is it. He says, whoever the writer was of the Declaration, Thomas Paine was its author. He didn't write it because he was not a resident of the United States. He had come from England, but he made sure that the ideology was expressed by him. The influence of those adepts who sponsored the formation of the American Republic and guided the drafting of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is seen in the fact that dogmatic religion plays no part in either of these documents. In the Declaration, nature and nature's God are specified. The natural rights of man, such as life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, are defended. The king is described as the head of a civilized rather than a Christian nation, and the appeal is made to the native justice and magnanimity of the British people. In the Constitution of 1787, it is stated that no religious test shall be required as a qualification for office, and the First Amendment to Article 6 prohibits the establishment of religion or the restraint of its free exercise. So it is really wrong to classify the United States as a Christian country, because it isn't. It gives freedom to all religious backgrounds, and that is why its growth has been very successful, because it does not constrict anything. There is nothing in the Constitution that says such a thing. So, believing that those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must also support that freedom and its means to get it. So for this reason, Paine volunteered for service in the Patriot Army, and shortly afterwards, out of his 13 pamphlets, the first one appeared, which was called The American Crisis. And the first sentence was, "These are times which try men's souls." And by Washington's order, this courage-inspiring writing was read to all of the soldiers at that time, which ended in their winning the Battle of Trenton. So in 1777, Paine was elected Secretary of the Committee of Foreign Affairs, and 2 years later he became clerk to the Pennsylvania Assembly. At once, an abolition of the slavery in Pennsylvania was introduced and adopted the following year as a result of Thomas Paine's writings. And in 1781, Paine went to France to obtain help for the Continental Congress, and as we know, the French king loaded him with favors and sent him back with 250,000 livres in silver and a ship laden with supplies. This was a timely help that France provided for the struggling colonists. After the war was over, Paine bought a little house in Bordentown, New Jersey, and he turned his attention to important invention, which was an iron bridge. Which is the precursor of the steel bridges, which was built on the model of this one. But it is stated that Thomas Paine was given this idea because Count de Saint-Germain was in London during that period in 1790, where he was there also, and it is stated that that model was given to him by Germain, which we also know that is an adept. So they definitely stand behind. They're never in the forefront, but they do produce these effects through the exertion of wisdom and presenting to us individuals who can carry out the work that is necessary at that time. He also came up with the idea of a central draught burner, which is a non-smoking candle. And he also, I think, came up with the idea of the steam being used for motorboats. He visited Paris in 1790, the spring of that year, and the French people who were celebrating the fall of the Bastille gave the key to Thomas Paine, who then sent it to General Washington, and to this day that key is in Washington's old home in Mount Vernon. In 1790, Edmund Burke's book In Defense of the Monarchy appeared in London, and Thomas Paine immediately wrote a reply to this, and he produced Rights of Man and dedicated it to Lafayette. 3 months later, he was summoned to the court of the king and denounced as a reviling the most sacred constitution in London. And after he talked to William Blake, who advised him to leave England, he did, and 20 minutes after his boat left, there was a appeal for his arrest. So his dearest hope was that the French Revolution and the Republic would receive the same assistance that the French people had given the struggling colonies. But unfortunately, Washington did not go along with this ideology, and there's a letter that Paine sent to Washington during that period requesting help from Washington, which actually made the American people turn against Paine later on because they thought that it was out of place what he had done. But if we remember that as a result of this, we have the War of 1812, we have to look at the events in historical chronology to see that if certain actions are taken, certain things can be prevented. But Washington did not want the young nation to be involved in France's struggle for freedom and did not provide the help. But we also have Washington stating that amongst all people who helped Republic to be formed, Thomas Paine's effort was the most valued, and he's asking for a succor for Thomas Paine to sustain him for all this work he had done. A man who worked for the nation did not have any time to work himself. But even in France, he was selected to sit on the assembly, but because the powers flip-flopped, then he was taken prisoner and sent to prison for 10 months, and he remained in there every day thinking that he was going to be taken to the guillotine, and he stayed in that prison for 10 months and wrote his articles about the rights of men. Now, we have a seal. United States has a seal. And this was formed, the Great Seal of the United States, was established by the resolution of the Continental Congress on June 20, 1782. Among those who helped design the Great Seal were Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, William Huston, and William Barton. All of these were Freemasons. So we see that the American bald eagle is on the front of it, and the breast of the eagle has a shield with 13 alternating red and white stripes, representing the 13 original states. Across the top of the shield is a blue field that unites all the stripes into the one. According to Charles Thomson, Secretary to the Continental Congress, the colors are those used in the flag of the United States of America. White signifies purity and innocence, red, hardiness and valor, and blue signifies vigilance, perseverance, and justice. In his beak, the eagle holds a flowing ribbon bearing the first motto of the United States, E pluribus unum. These Latin words translated mean out of many, one, meaning that out of the many states was born one new united nation. In his right talon, the eagle clutches an olive branch with 13 leaves and 13 olives. it's right here, and the arrows are on the other side. Olive branch symbolizes peace. In its left talon, the eagle holds 13 arrows in a bundle, signifying war. Both these together symbolize that the United States has a strong desire for peace, but will always be ready for war. Here again, number 13 is taken to represent the 13 original states. Above the head of the eagle appears a crest or a constellation of 13 stars against a blue sky, surrounded by rays of light and an encircling cloud. The reverse side has an unfinished pyramid whose capstone is removed right here, so that in the zenith we find a blazing eye dazzling the sight in that triangle. The eye is taken to represent the eye of providence, or even the eye of Horus. Above it, the words "heavens approve," and underneath it, the sentence "a new order of the ages" appears. Mr. Judge explains that the design of the seal was not an accident, but was actually intended to symbolize the building of a new order of the ages, and we know that this is what Paine had seen in his mind's eye, which brought him over here to the American continent. So, the vision which was presented to the mind of Thomas Paine, New Order of the Ages, was a beginning in America. So the Theosophical adepts could see that it was the right time to usher a new order and a new chance for freedom and brotherhood of men. So the Great Seal then of the United States, in a way, carries the mark of the presence of the adepts who oversaw the drafting of the American Declaration and drawing of the Constitution, and inspired Washington, Jefferson, and other brave Freemasons to found a government in the West that was free from dogmatism. Now, this is our past that has brought us to here today. But HPB has an article to the American Theosophists that she had written right before she died. In it, it says that if the Theosophical students of the coming centuries, meaning the 20th and the 21st centuries, and if we see around us, a new order of the ages had begun then. But what is it that we see today? Where have we gone with it? Is we need to really ask. Are we following in the footsteps of these Freemasons that brought about a free government in the West, which was the hope of the whole universe, whole humanity world over? Or have we separated from this ideology, is what each human being at this stage has to ask. HPB says, if you do all and every duty that is correct for your times, then she says, the 21st century will be a golden age to live in. Well, we need to look around to see if we have brought this golden age about, and if we are moving in that direction. Now, the first object is a universal brotherhood, the center, the core, the nucleus of that center be built, and that as the age goes further on, that center enlarge to include more and more of the enlightened minds, whether they are theosophists or not, but that they can carry on with this projected new order of the ages into the 21st century. Now, they make an effort at the end of the century, during the last 25 years. So this means that we're going to live until, this is 2019. $2,075. And depending on whether we deserve a new impulse or not, it will come or it will not come, because it did not come in 1975. They did not bring it out into the world. They come, but not always to the world at large. This student read the whole unanimous declaration of the 50, I think it was 56 that signed it. Yes, indeed, 56 persons pledged their fortunes and their sacred honor to this declaration when it was initially produced. Now, in these documents, the forefathers of this nation saw to it that freedom would be retained, that freedom of speech, and what was it that we talked about? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all would be secure. But when we look around today, we need to ask if this is real, or if we are letting it pass out. Another article that needs to come to the forefront is written about the United States. In this article, the author is not available, but it is stated that the United States faces fracture. And it specifies different areas: north, south of the east, north and south of the middle stages, and north and south of the west. Now, in the article it says the west is the most progressive. Is the progressive. And that northeast and southeast is not defined when the article was written, and it could have been written 50 years ago or earlier, but even then they are foreseeing the future for us and telling us what we need to do to retain the integrity of the United States of America, that it can fracture. Because if we do not have a progressive attitude towards life, where all participants in that life are guaranteed life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, is going to fracture. And we're going to go back to how many colonies? 13. And they have listed for at least 6 or 7 in that article. So we stand again that danger that if we do not stand united, it's going to fracture. In many, many places, this statement is also written: united we stand, but divided we fall. Just like 20, 30 years ago, we were reminded that climate change was a reality, and today there are a lot of people who are resisting that, but its evidence is everywhere. HPB had an article about cutting down forests and changing the landscape, not only of the United States, but China was doing the same thing. And she said that our welfare as humanity is dependent on trees, and that if we get rid of them, we will change the wind patterns, in other words, rain patterns of our universe, and that would have a negative effect on humanity. This year, this student just heard a report that we need to put in how many trees? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of trees. So look at what she foresaw and told us to mind it, and look at what they're saying as to what can happen to us, and we don't pay any attention to these warnings. Because why would they know? Because they know that things come in cyclic order. Whatever has been is going to be again. This is the Aquarian age. Aquarian age is a united front for humanity because it is based on compassion. This compassion is in the heart of every human soul. So if we don't feel compassion for our nation, how are we going to be feeling compassion, universal compassion for all of the other nations which are also a part of us? Yes, we come to different places as different people. We might have different languages, but we all expect to live a useful, productive life, free of harm, be able to raise our children, send them to schools, and educate them appropriately for the 21st century. And this is a worldwide effort. It's not just America that wants this for herself, but all the other nations also have the same goals as we do. So if we do not work together, we won't achieve it. First, United States needs to understand that regardless of what area we occupy and what background we have come from, we still constitute one nation. Our similarities are a lot more than our differences. Thomas Paine, as we said, died in 1809. In honor of Thomas Paine, was unveiled on June 8th in New York City at the 3-story house, 59 Grove Street, which was a site of an earlier house that Paine died in 1809. The date selected marked the 114th anniversary of the death of the author of Common Sense and the Rights of Men. The tablet, which is the first memorial to Thomas Paine in New York City, is 14 by 19 inches in size. In its center, there is a 3/4 portrait of Paine, and on the 3 sides of the head are inscribed his glorious sayings. The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, to the good is my religion. At the top there's a symbolic map suggesting United States, and on the right and left are maps representing respectively British Isles and France. Beneath the portrait is an inscription, Thomas Paine, born 1737, died 1809, followed by these words, I believe in one God and no more. And in this connection with this memorial, which is in line with and an expression of the purpose of HPB, as stated in the preface to Isis Unveiled, a restitution of borrowed robes and the vindication of glorious but calumniated reputations, the following will be of interest. Thomas Paine died in that house at 59 Grove Street. Paine was very ill when he was removed there from his former residence, and he was taken to Grove Street by Madame Bonneville, who had befriended him in his days of poverty and illness in New York. He was buried at New Rochelle in 1819, but in 1819 his remains were removed by William Cobbett because he wanted to build a monument to Tom Paine in England in order to honor him. But this was never done. And Moncure Conway, in his Life of Paine, states that in 1836 the bones of Thomas Paine with Cobbett's possessions were taken charge of by a receiver, and after passing through various hands finally disappeared. To this day it is stated we do not know where his final resting place is. Thomas Paine believed that the universe is governed by immutable law. A miracle, therefore, was inconceivable. Unless we know the whole extent of nature's laws, he argued, we're not able to judge whether anything that may appear miraculous to us be within or contrary to her natural power of acting. Thomas Paine's own faith was centered in the belief of a first cause eternally existing and of a universe governed by law. His religion was summarized in his famous sentence, "My country is the world, and my religion is to do good." And his religion transcended the formal professions of any cult or sect. He refused to accept the creed of any church. "My mind is my church," he said, "and churches are but human inventions set up to enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit." So we will stop here and open it. If you have any comments, please make them. Or if you have questions.
I have
Yes.
a question. Do you know if Thomas Paine helped develop those seals? Do you know if Thomas Paine helped develop the seals?
No, not
No.
the seal.
No.
The seal was constructed by the adepts, I think, were behind the seal. He was mainly concerned with the independence, the establishment of independence of the colonies, secession from the British Isles, and also the Declaration. He formulated those both, but the seal is actually recorded. It says that the Great Seal was designed by Benjamin Franklin, who sent him to the United States, as you remember.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Thomas Jefferson, William Houston, and William Barton. They were all Freemasons, and this is very important because Freemasons know the numerology,
Right.
and they know how to think correctly based on numbers.
Mhm.
And so it was important that dogma not be in neither the Declaration nor the Constitution, and it isn't. And even though intermittently dogmatic religion kind of tried to insert God and God's prayer and stuff like that, it never took place because it was formulated at that time and it is still protected. So he helped the colonies establish the Republic, and the adepts were behind the formation of this seal, because this capstone is very suggestive.
Right.
With the
I know all about that. It's like
yeah, it really is very
out there.
suggestive. Where did it come from? Why
Yeah.
is it there in 1778,
Yeah.
1776, or 18? This is 1782. Its formulation is 1782. So it is very, very obvious that there was some influence in bringing it about. The zenith we find a blazing eye in a triangle dazzling the sight. So when you think of the color scheme, this here, the light shining above, and then the light shining through the eye. It is very suggestive that the heavens approve the new order at the bottom of the caption, new order of ages, and that is what he had seen in his mind, Thomas Paine, when he came to the when he left United Kingdom to come to United States. Well, it wasn't United States back then, it was the colonies struggling for freedom from Great Britain, because the king was really usurping all their powers of independent thought, independent law, independent justice. None of that was present. They were being choked by taxes and things that the king decided to impose upon them. And also there was a lot of intrigue by the British soldiers going on. So Paine not only was instrumental in those documents, but he was also instrumental through those years uplifting the souls of those soldiers and giving them courage through common sense and the crisis articles. He wrote 13 of them. There is an organization that actually has all of his writings, and they retain the originals. So he was a great soul, but his importance was really diminished by all the negative attitude of the church fathers that made him look like he was a drunkard, debtor, all kinds of negative stuff they printed. So it says that this human sun, and they wrote it this way, was not allowed to shine with glory, but now 3 nations claim him, not just United States, but Great Britain and France also. Yes?
There's at least one website, probably more, but it seems to contain all of Tom Paine's writings. And they were massive. There's a lot of stuff he did that I don't know where I was.
Yes.
Now, we all know that just looking at the history of the United States, that independence and freedom is a messy business. It's very difficult to maintain opportunities for all in this kind of environment. But, you know, it comes and goes. I've also been told, just wanted to throw in one thing, that the more things seem to be falling apart, the more they may be coming together. So in this day and age, when we have such diversity and so many different factions out there, is possible that might be happening? I don't know.
Well, we have to remember that we don't really see the whole picture. We see particular aspects of it at one time. What these beings do, they see the overview. Because even in the writings, many places it says that H.P. was at that time showing a bird's eye view as to what was going to happen. So they have that overview, and we said that as cycles come and go, history repeats itself, because in that particular article where it discussed the possibility of fracture of the United States into segments again, depending on what the people did with their opportunities for freedom and cultivation of the unity of the nation as one, it also states that depending on what we do, the future will repeat itself with the opportunity, but the determination is with us. No outside force is determining what is going to happen to us. All humanity, regardless of where we are, we're determining our own future. The opportunity comes, but there is no destiny written, this is the end result, this is what's going to happen. We, humanity, bring it about. So we need to be aware of our own actions, and what they're saying is, don't believe what people tell you. Put it to the inner questioning within yourself, In other words, don't be a follower, do your own thinking for yourself. And if you see any causes that sits correctly in your heart, then participate in it. Don't leave it to someone else to make the decision to participate. You go out and participate in it also. So we cannot become relying on other people. For instance, do we approve what's going on in the Senate or in the House? They're supposed to represent us, the ordinary people. They are there to serve us. We need to ask the question, are they serving us? Who exactly are they serving? We know that these big pharmaceutical companies own their own representatives on the Hill. They buy and sell candidates, it looks like, to this student. Even though I'm not political in any sense, I can reason in my mind as to what is going on up there. Are we going to just ignore it? There's a student saw on PBS a busload of people going to Canada to buy insulin, because here one vial is $600. In Canada, it's $30. So why should United States be in this terrible position? Why is it that our government cannot control pricing? We need to ask these questions. No one can give us the answers. What they're saying is, get involved. Do your own thinking and come to your own conclusions based on knowledge. 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 How do we obtain this knowledge? By learning what has been sent out for us. Look at all these books: Isis Unveiled, Secret Doctrine, Letters That Help Me, The Ocean of Theosophy, Universal Theosophy. All these books were sent to us by the Master's Lodge, and that is also a fact. And if we want to get at this knowledge, we have to do all our own studying. The student who gives a talk is also a student. Her understanding is also limited. So we need to look into what is being said ourselves to see what our own understanding is and what is it that we need to do for the future. Because this is a time we must get involved. If we don't get involved, there will not be any solution to our problems, because they're gigantic, humongous problems, and we need to get united to solve it. So does that answer your question?
I had another question too. You talked about knowledge, and you pointed to all those books behind you.
Yeah.
Is that the purpose of bringing this out? There's a lot of information in there. But there's no prescriptions that I see.
Because each human soul is free to make their own choices. No man can tell you what to do. You are your own authority. This is the 21st century. On the entrance arc of the temple at Alexandria was written, "Man, know thyself." This knowledge is for us to know who and what we are. We are not sinful little human beings. We come from great powers of nature, represented by either the Christian angels or the Diane-Johanic host of the Secret Doctrine. It is one and the same thing. The Christian theology has dwarfed that to just about nothingness, but if you go to the original writings and seek the underlying meaning, they all say the same thing. So, man, know thyself. How do we get to know ourselves? By discovering who or what we are. Isn't that true? Or what we are. How are we going to know ourselves? Who are we? Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? And what is the highest achievable purpose in life? Those are the things that we need to ask and answer for ourselves. And all this information here provides the answer to those questions. HPB's first question to herself was, who is God? Who am I? How am I linked to that God? And who can answer those questions? And she went all over the universe asking those questions. And she says, finally she came across beings whose knowledge was so great that they could show her the way. And she, in her return, shows the way to us, but no one can force another human soul to accept or reject. Everyone has the right to make their own choices, and the 21st century is different because each human being is his own authority. You make that decision. You have to find out for yourself who you are, what you are, and not follow general consensus. Yes?
And it's important to point out that these books they don't serve truth to you on a platter. You have to work for it, and they're written in a way that, you know, as you read, as you do research, it helps you open up.
Yeah, indeed it does. She tells us that her main objective was not just to provide this information so that in time when we assimilate it, it becomes knowledge, but to also open our intuition. Without which, she said, these books would not become clear to us, because it's an internal quality, remembering that this philosophy is dependent on 7 principles, that each human soul has 7 principles. So that in itself shows that we're not just body, soul, and spirit, but there are other component parts that we have to consider. And in this philosophy, there are 7 principles, 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of substance that correlate with the level of consciousness, and that each human soul is on an evolutionary journey. The highest achievable is perfectibility, that each human soul in its higher aspect is perfect, but the personality that the body in conjunction with the lower mind constitutes that lower personality is in that evolutionary journey, that death such as prescribed by the religions do not exist, that life is on a continuum. Karma and reincarnation of the East is a reality when you think internally and deeply about what this philosophy tells you, that there is no death. They consider death as a longer sleep. Just like she says, when you go to bed at night, you sleep and you wake up in the morning, you don't know where you are. Do we know where we went at night? No, because the body is totally asleep. It's quiet. And the inner ego then lives on the spiritual fields of operation. But we're not aware of it. In other words, this human soul standing here is not aware of it because I do not partake in it. It has to actually awaken the ganglions or ganglia in the brain in order to impress anything it wants you to retain the next day. And that is also a gift that comes through that intuitive process. And until our intuition is perfected, we can partially understand it and partially live it, because we are 7 levels. And all those are color and number correlated. That's why the decade of Pythagoras is telling the truth, and we need to think about those things. So I'm sorry, in this 1 hour, short 1 hour, we cannot go into all of the details, but it really has to sit correctly within each human soul. In other words, with your not just your intuition, but with your common sense. If it doesn't appeal to you, you won't follow it. It means you're not at that point to follow it. But as you read it more and more, and you understand it more and more, and you share it more and more, all those centers automatically open up, as the student pointed out, that it guides you internally to get more of the knowledge. At first it's information, but it becomes knowledge as you pursue that path more and more. And one lifetime will not be sufficient for perfectibility either, because Krishna said in the reading, one tries to get to know me as I am, or out of 1 million, and one out of many millions perhaps will succeed. So if the road was that easy, we would all achieve it very easily, but it requires work. Why? Because we have put illusion in our way. We have become immersed in substance. We are a very materialistic society, and we need to remove that elusive power of material over us and try to follow the inner light. Yes?
2 things. I've often heard that this is sanctified common sense. I think that's what I see between
Correct.
the lines. Second thing is, we can't conceive of these immense periods of time. So even one out of 1 million might be getting there now, and it sounds like, well, what's my chances? We're talking about an infinite period of time.
Correct.
Mr. Judge has in the ocean
Correct.
years involved in these.
Kali Yuga. Yeah. As you know, there are 4 ages: golden, silver. We have read it in historical books. Bronze and dark age. This happens to be dark age. Both India and the West being in the Kali Yuga. And I don't know if you have seen this word.
Well, I'm trying to, there's plenty of room for encouragement.
Kali Yuga, he means that it's 430?
32,000, 432?
I'm not sure. I don't retain this stuff in my head. But we will
432,000
look.
years.
Yeah, something like that. You are saying that it's an immense period of time, and it
And
is
that's
indeed.
one of the shorter periods of time.
Yeah, it's faster. And Kali Yuga is faster. I don't know what. Here it is. Okay, Kali Yuga is 432,000 years. So we have spent 5,000 of that Kali Yuga, and this information was brought out for us at the end of that 5,000 years in the 19th century.
But it depends on how many, how we react as humanity. That 432 might not be 432, it could be less if we wake up.
Yeah, if we wake up and shape up and move it forward, yes, of course, we can shorten it. So within, and also humanity is not, all of us are not at the same place, meaning that there are nations perhaps living in their golden age, but we're not aware of it because they're not materialistic. Like the Buddhist people are poor, but they live a spiritual life. They're not at all attached to life or material things. Of course, now the Chinese has overtaken that too, but that's another story. Yeah. But there is a writing about the Hopi Indians who are also very spiritual and totally independent of our own ways of life, even though they live here in the United States. So if there are no other questions, we'll stop it here. Thank you for coming.
And we have our afternoon meeting too tonight.
Correct. We're studying the Bhagavad Gita.